So this video I'm going to talk about applying the second layer of cold molded planking on the sides, and as a reminder I showed this diagram before when I talked about the first layer of planking on both the bottom and the sides. Just again as a reminder, so here's the chine, and I started with the first layer on the bottom and then did the first layer on the sides, second layer on the bottom. So this video we're talking about the second layer on the sides. So if you notice, the second layer on the bottom and the first layer on the sides is flush. And then so what this second layer on the sides is going to do is lap up over the second layer on the bottom. So we'll see that here if you notice. So here's that second layer on the bottom, and this is just the first layer on the side, and you can see how this outer edge is flush with the first layer on the sides. So here are my first four pieces on the second layer on the sides, and the angle of course is going opposite of the angle first layer on the side. And what I did is I encapsulated both the boat and the back side of these pieces and then applied the thickened epoxy. And later on, like I will mention in later videos, I started putting thickened epoxy both on the boat and on these backside of the pieces. I can't remember exactly when I started doing that, but that's what I ended up doing, and I recommend doing it that way. So here I've got the next three pieces applied, and you can see how they're wider. In the flatter parts of both the sides and actually the bottom, you can use wider planking pieces, and then as you get to more curvy parts of the boat, then you have to make them more narrow. So working my way towards the back there, and here I'm working my way towards the front. And you can see how these are, what I had to do here, actually I didn't have these lap up over the side of the boat like I did with the pieces towards the back. I actually had to make them mate this edge of the bottom planking just because of the angle here. There was no way to really make these lap up over that edge. And this also, I found another area where two adjacent pieces, one was bowed up a little bit, so I had to put the epoxy in that seam and then find some creative way of clamping it. And I had to do this in several areas. You'll see it in future videos as well, how I had to do that. And it helps save some of the fairing, so you don't have to do quite as much. And here you can see work my way all the way to the front. And this final piece you can see just kind of a skinny piece, but that's just the way it worked out. So here I am working my way towards the back of the boat, and in this area the coverage of the boat is getting more severe, so it takes more clamping pressure. So here I'm actually using clamps. As you can see, it is nice to be able to use these on this bottom edge, but on the top I was able to hold it okay with composite nails. And here I am working my way all the way towards the back, and you can see for these last few pieces here, what I did is because it's so curvy here, if you notice the grain of these pieces goes up and down like this, and it's harder to bend the pieces of plywood that way, whereas if you bend them cross grain like this, it's cheating a little bit, but it works okay because plywood, actually each layer is cross opposite grain. And so it just makes it easier to bend and put these pieces in place. So that's what I did. And here's that side all the way done. And again, as I went along, I applied epoxy into the seams just to fill any little gaps that were there. And here it's trimmed flush with a transom and also trimmed with this edge of the bottom edge of the boat. And I did use my hand belt sander to do this type of trimming. You just have to be careful once you get close to where it's flush, but it works pretty well. And here you can see that side all done and trimmed both on the top edge and then along this bottom edge, which will eventually be the top edge when it's flipped. And here's some more areas where I had some adjacent pieces where one was higher than the other. So putting a little bit of thickened epoxy in there and then holding them works pretty well to flatten that surface. You can see even back here, I did it back here, but I still had to do some fairing. You can see the witness marks of when you fair plywood. It looks kind of odd like that. Here I'm just working my way towards the back with some additional pieces. Same thing here. And here I'm just showing the pieces that are cut out for the final pieces along this side. And I did the same thing with the grain. These last couple pieces here I bent them cross grain. And you can see all of the composite nails, how many you use. There's lots of them. These marks I tried to mark along the battens, and this is in between them, but I still did a lot of nailing. There are thousands of composite nails in the boat. And I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but it's nice using these. If you use metal staples, you probably will need to pull them out, and with these composite nails, you don't need to do that at all. So here I'm working my way towards the front, continuing towards the front. Found a couple more areas that needed to be flattened out some more. Continuing to work my way. And now this other side is done, and you can see again I've got this last piece is thin, and the way I did these planking layers from side to side is I would have one side lap over the other. So what I did is this first side, which is the opposite one, I had that piece overhang, and then this piece kind of goes up flush with it, and then you sand it flush once you're done, and it actually makes a pretty clean edge. So this is showing everything sanded flush with both the bottom and the transom on this side here, which is the starboard side, and that's showing it being complete. In this picture I'm just showing this bottom edge, how I did do sanding to trim that basically to roughly what it'll be. Once I flip the boat, that will get sanded even more. So that is the second layer of side planking.